Star Trek, the Next Generation's 34-year-old take on gender identity was surprisingly progressive. One particularly progressive episode of Star Trek, The Next Generation addressed a hot-button topic in 1990. Since Star Trek, the original series premiered in 1966, the franchise has always been ahead of its time. With his optimistic view of the future, Gene Roddenberry created a universe where the Earth had achieved peace and used its resources to explore the galaxy. TNG expanded on this vision, picking up a century after TOS and following Captain Jean-Luc Picard, Patrick Stewart, and the crew of the USS Enterprise D. Since its inception, Star Trek has held a mirror to society, addressing controversial topics, many of which remain relevant today. While some of Star Trek's social commentary proved more effective than others, the franchise has always tried to push boundaries and make people think. The science fiction trappings of Star Trek have allowed the franchise to tackle topics that networks might otherwise have banned. One of LT Commander Data's, Brent Spiner, best episodes, Star Trek, The Next Generation, Season 3, Episode 16, The Offspring, references a particularly polarizing topic when Data creates an android child. Star Trek, TNG's The Offspring is surprisingly progressive regarding sexuality and gender. In Star Trek, The Next Generation's The Offspring, Data builds upon his positronic brain's technology to create an android child named Lal, Holly Todd. When Data first activates Lal, who has an alien but humanoid form, he does not assign them a gender. Data invites Counselor Deanna Troi, Marina Sirtis, LT Commander Giorda LaForge, LeVar Burton, and Ensign Wesley Crusher, Will Wheaton, to be the first people to meet Lal. Data then allows Lal to choose their own species and gender, and they cycle through many choices before finally deciding to become a human female. None of Data's fellow crewmates bat an eye regarding Lal's appearance or Data's decision to allow her to choose her own gender. However, it's doubtful that television networks of 1990 would have allowed a story about a human crew member who allowed their young child to choose their gender. Some networks today would hesitate to tell that story, as gender-affirming care for young people remains a controversial topic. The Offspring is widely regarded as one of Star Trek, The Next Generation's best episodes, but many reviews fail to acknowledge how progressive this element of the storyline was, even for Star Trek. Modern Star Trek continues to celebrate progress and diversity. Star Trek entered the modern era of streaming television in 2017 with the premiere of Star Trek Discovery. With an incredibly talented cast led by Sonequa Martin Green as Commander Michael Burnham, Discovery was the most diverse Star Trek show to date. Star Trek Discovery introduced the first gay married couple in the franchise, as well as Star Trek's first non-binary and transgender characters. Star Trek shows have continued to push boundaries and adapt their social commentary to the time period in which they were made. Star Trek Picard, Star Trek Lower Decks, Star Trek Prodigy, and Star Trek Strange New Worlds have also continued this trend. All of these shows are undeniably Star Trek, not only incorporating elements of Trek's long history, but also upholding one of Star Trek's greatest strengths: infinite diversity in infinite combinations. Indeed, diversity and progress have always been core tenets of Star Trek. After all, Star Trek, The Next Generation aired one of the franchise's most progressive episodes back in 1990. In 1992, Star Trek, The Next Generation, TNG, aired an episode that touched on a theme that would not reach mainstream discourse for decades: gender identity. Titled The Outcast, the episode offered a science fiction lens on the complexities of gender, portraying an advanced society that had moved beyond traditional binary gender classifications. Though not without its limitations, The Outcast was a remarkably forward-thinking exploration of gender, considering its era and the prevailing attitudes toward LGBTQ+ issues at the time. In The Outcast, the crew of the USS Enterprise encounters the Genii, a humanoid species that has evolved beyond gender. In Genii society, identifying as either male or female is seen as an aberration. Those who express gender identity or who exhibit feelings of attraction toward one specific gender are considered deviant and subjected to a form of psychotectic therapy designed to correct their identity. The story focuses on Soren, a Genii who secretly identifies as female and becomes romantically involved with Commander Riker. The episode's conflict arises when Soren is outed and faces punishment for her gender nonconformity. At first glance, The Outcast appears to be a simple allegory for the experiences of LGBTQ+ individuals. especially given the historical context in which it was produced. In the early 1990s, discussions of sexual orientation and gender identity were only just beginning to enter public discourse in a meaningful way. The LGBTQ+ community was still grappling with widespread discrimination, the ongoing HIV/AIDS epidemic, and harsh cultural stigmas. Given this backdrop, TNG's decision to center an episode around an alien species that challenges the concept of gender can be seen as a bold move for the time. However, The Outcast does not map perfectly onto issues of sexual orientation alone. Instead, its narrative is surprisingly nuanced, touching on issues of gender identity, non-binary existence, and societal pressures to conform. The Janai Society represents an enforced gender neutrality, where any divergence from their gender norm is considered dangerous. This is particularly striking when viewed through a contemporary lens, as it mirrors the experiences of non-binary and gender non-conforming individuals who have often been pressured to conform to traditional binary understandings of gender. Soren's character, in particular, resonates with the struggle many transgender and non-binary individuals face today. She describes her feelings of being different from a young age, a sentiment echoed by countless transgender people in their own experiences of gender dysphoria. Her internal conflict and eventual confrontation with her society's rigid norms mirror the difficult journeys many undergo to express their authentic selves. This thematic exploration of self versus societal expectation gives The Outcast a depth that feels ahead of its time. At the heart of the episode is the romantic relationship between Soren and Commander Riker, which pushes the boundaries of what TNG had previously addressed in terms of gender and sexuality. Their relationship challenges both the Janai's rigid cultural norms and, by extension, the assumptions of the audience. Riker, a symbol of traditionally masculine, heteronormative Starfleet ideals, is willing to risk his career to protect Soren and affirm her identity. This dynamic subtly underscores the idea that love and attraction are not confined to societal gender binaries, a progressive notion that challenges gender essentialist thinking, even if not fully recognized at the time. The Outcast also addresses the consequences of societal non-acceptance in a poignant and emotionally charged scene. Soren is subjected to forced therapy, a clear parallel to real-world conversion therapy practices which have been used to try to cure LGBTQ+ individuals of their identities. Soren's speech during her trial, where she expresses her desire to live authentically, is a powerful condemnation of such practices. She says, "I am female. I was born that way. And that is who I am." Her plea to be accepted for who she is echoes the calls for understanding and acceptance from transgender individuals and others who challenge societal norms around gender. Despite its many progressive elements, The Outcast is not without its shortcomings. For one, the character of Soren is portrayed by a cisgender female actor, which may limit the authenticity of the portrayal. Additionally, the episode stops short of directly addressing sexual orientation in a more explicit way, perhaps due to the constraints of 1990s television standards. Some critics have noted that the episode's ultimate failure to rescue Soren from her society's repressive treatment feels like a missed opportunity to provide a hopeful resolution for gender nonconforming individuals. Still, it's important to view The Outcast in the context of its time. In 1992, mainstream media rarely addressed gender identity,